Stop for a second. Before you do anything else, before you skip ahead, before you decide whether this is worth your time, before your mind starts doing that thing it always does, where it half listens while already planning the next thing, I need you to actually stop. Because what I'm about to tell you is not another productivity hack. It's not a morning routine. It's not 5 habits of successful people. It's something that, once you genuinely understand it, will make you look back at the last several years of your life and see them with completely different eyes. Not with regret, with clarity, and with something that feels a lot like relief. Here it is. You have been running the most important race of your life using only one leg. Not because you're weak, not because you lack discipline or intelligence or drive, but because no one ever told you the other leg existed. And the moment that changes, the moment you actually feel what I'm pointing at rather than just intellectually noting it, something shifts permanently in a way that no amount of journaling or goal setting or self-help content has ever been able to touch. So stay with me, please, because this one is different. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're sitting in a coffee shop. Not a fancy one, just your regular spot. The kind where they know your order, where the music is little too loud, but somehow it's fine. Where you've had 100 conversations and twice as many thoughts. You've got your phone face down on the table because you're trying to be intentional about that. You've got a notebook open. Maybe you're working on a goal. Maybe you're trying to figure out why, despite everything you've been doing, despite the consistency and the planning and the genuine effort, things just aren't moving the way you need them to move. You look at the person across from you. Let's say it's a friend, someone who knows you, someone who's watched you work hard and mean it, and you say something that you probably never said out loud, but have definitely thought 100 times in the dark at 2 a.m. I'm doing everything right. Why is nothing changing? And here's the thing. That question, that exhausted, honest, slightly terrified question, it's not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's actually the most important question you could possibly be asking. Because the answer to it will rewrite everything. The answer is this. You've been using the wrong instrument, not the wrong strategy, not the wrong goal, the wrong instrument entirely. Here's something that the world of personal development, for all its books and podcasts and YouTube channels, rarely explains with the kind of precision it deserves. Your mind, the one you think of as yours, the one doing the reading right now, the one that makes decisions and sets goals and has opinions and worries about tomorrow. That mind accounts for approximately 5% of your total mental activity. 5%. Let that sit for a moment before your brain tries to logic its way around it. The part of you that you identify as yourself, your reasoning, your willpower, your daily inner monologue, all of it, represents 5% of what is actually happening inside you at any given moment. The other 95%, it's running right now. It has been running every second of your life. It governs your heartbeat, your immune response, your breathing, your deeply held beliefs about what you deserve and what you don't, your automatic reactions, your patterns in relationships, your relationship with money, your sense of what's possible for someone like you. And here's the part that will either break you open or send you straight into denial, depending on where you are right now. That 95% is what's actually creating your life, not your conscious intentions, not your vision board, not your affirmations, not the carefully worded goals you wrote down on January 1st. The 95%, the part you've been largely ignoring because no one gave you the instruction manual. You have been trying to renovate a house using only the doorbell. Now I want to give you a picture for this because abstractions don't stick the way images do, and what I want is for this to genuinely land rather than just sound interesting for 30 seconds before the next notification pulls you somewhere else. Think about your phone, the screen, the part you see, the part you tap and swipe and interact with. That's your conscious mind. It's clean, it's responsive, it's where you make your choices. It feels like it's running the show. But underneath that screen, there are servers. Enormous, humming, invisible servers processing millions of operations per second, storing your data, running background processes, executing code that determines what you see, what gets suggested to you, what patterns your experience follows. The screen shows you 5% of what's happening. The servers are running 95% of your actual reality. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people spend their entire lives arguing with the screen, updating the screen, staring at the screen, and never once ask what's happening on the servers. That's the work we're doing here, not more screen time. Server access. Joseph Murphy understood this long before neuroscience had the language to confirm it. He understood that the human mind is not a unified thing. It is not a single instrument with a single set of controls. It is a layered, stratified, extraordinarily complex system, and the layer that most people live in almost exclusively, the thin, bright, noisy layer of conscious awareness, is not where the real power lives. The real power lives in the subconscious, in the servers, in the 95%. And the tragedy, the genuinely heartbreaking thing that I want you to feel rather than just think about, is not that this power is inaccessible. It's that it has been accessible your entire life. You were born with it. It came standard, no upgrades required, and somehow, in the process of growing up, of being educated, of being shaped by a world that rewards logic and discipline and visible effort above everything else, you were taught to ignore 95% of your own capacity. You were taught to survive on the island while an entire continent waited. I know what some of you are thinking right now, because I've thought it too. Okay, but this sounds a little woo. Like, is this science? Or is this the thing where someone talks about vibrations and the universe and suddenly we're manifesting parking spots? Fair. Completely fair. I'm not asking you to bypass your intelligence. I'm asking you to expand it. Here's what the science actually says. Neuroscientist Dr. Bruce Lipton spent years researching the biology of belief and concluded that the subconscious mind processes somewhere in the range of 40 million pieces of information per second. Your conscious mind, around 40. The subconscious is not a mystical concept. It's a measurable, documented, neurologically real system that operates beneath the threshold of your awareness and exerts an influence on your behavior, your physiology, and your reality that dwarfs anything your conscious mind is capable of producing. This isn't philosophy. This is the architecture of your actual brain. And when you understand that architecture, when you stop trying to rewire the house using only the light switch, everything changes. Let me tell you about the version of you that's been showing up to your life. This version, let's call them the screen operator, wakes up every morning with genuine intentions. They set goals. They read books. They want things, real things, important things, health, financial stability, relationships that don't repeat the same exhausting patterns, a sense that they're moving forward rather than spinning in place. And the screen operator works hard. They apply willpower. They push through resistance. They try affirmations and visualization and every tool that well-meaning people have handed them, and they feel for a moment a real surge of hope and possibility. And then life happens. The bill arrives. The conversation doesn't go the way they planned. The body doesn't respond the way they want it to. The opportunity falls through. And the screen operator, exhausted from trying to run an entire server farm using nothing but the touchscreen, concludes something devastating. This is just who I am. This is my ceiling. Some people get the big life. I get this one. But that conclusion is not the truth. It's not even close to the truth. It is simply what happens when someone tries to operate 100% of their life using 5% of their available instrument. You are not hitting the ceiling of your nature. You are hitting the ceiling of your method. And the method can be changed. Here's what the continent looks like. Here's what your 95% actually contains, what it's capable of, what it's been quietly holding on your behalf while you've been fighting the river on the surface. First, your subconscious mind is the original architect of your body, not metaphorically, literally. It built you from a single cell. It differentiated your tissues, formed your organs, established the extraordinary self-regulating machinery of your cardiovascular system, your immune system, your endocrine system, all of it, without a single conscious instruction from your 5%. And it has been maintaining that system every second ever since. The blueprint it holds for your body is not a blueprint of the body as it currently appears, with its accumulated stress and conditioned limitations. It is the blueprint of the original design, the body in its state of designed perfection. Second, your subconscious is the invisible architect of your external circumstances. It doesn't just affect your inner state, it actively shapes the world around you, the connections you make, the opportunities that find you, the synchronicities that seem like luck but aren't. When the servers are running the right program, the world reorganizes itself around you in ways that your conscious mind, operating from its narrow strip of logic, could never have planned or predicted. Third, your subconscious is your direct access point to something much larger than your individual mind. Call it universal intelligence, the unified field, the source. The language matters less than the reality it's pointing at. You are not a closed system. You are a node in a network of awareness so vast and so interconnected that the intelligence available to you when you learn to access it correctly has no ceiling. The continent is real. It's been real your entire life. And you are the rightful owner of every square inch of it. The question, the only question that matters from this point forward, is how do you get there? How does the screen operator stop begging the touch screen for resources it was never designed to supply and start accessing the servers? That's what the rest of this is for. But first, I need you to do something. Not later, right now. in this moment. I need you to feel, even briefly, even if it's just a flicker, what it would mean to find out that you are not too small for the life you want, that you have not been failing, that you have been navigating a continent you didn't know existed in a language you were never taught, without a map. Feel that for a second, because that's where everything starts, not with another plan, not with more effort, with the recognition that the instrument you've been missing has been inside you this entire time. We're just getting started. Why everything you've tried has kept you exactly where you are. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly. Not the answer that sounds good, the actual answer. How many times have you started over? How many Monday mornings have felt like a genuine new beginning? How many January 1sts? How many this time is different moments? How many notebooks opened to the first clean page with a real sense of possibility? How many times have you committed, truly committed, not half-heartedly, but with real sincerity and real desire, to changing something that mattered deeply to you? And how many of those commitments quietly dissolved, not dramatically, not with a single catastrophic failure, but gradually, imperceptibly, the way a fire goes out when the wood runs out, not with a bang, just with a slow cooling, until one morning you realize the warmth is gone and you're not even sure when it left. If that lands somewhere real in you, I need you to know something before we go any further. That is not a character flaw. That is not evidence that you lack discipline, or that you're somehow fundamentally broken, or that the life you want is reserved for people who are different from you in some essential way. That cycle, the genuine beginning, the gradual dissolution, the quiet return to familiar patterns, is the predictable, almost mathematically inevitable result of a specific and entirely correctable mistake. You have been trying to reprogram the servers by arguing with the screen, and it simply doesn't work. Not because you're not trying hard enough, because that's not how servers work. Let me show you exactly what's been happening, not in vague terms, in precise mechanical terms. Because once you see the mechanism clearly, it loses most of its power over you. Your subconscious mind, those 95% servers running beneath the surface of your awareness, is not a passive storage system. It is an active, executing, perpetually operating program. And like any program, it runs on code. It doesn't run on your current intentions. It doesn't run on what you consciously want right now, today, in this moment of clarity and genuine desire. It runs on the code that was written into it over years and decades of experience, repetition, and emotionally charged input. That code was written mostly before you were 7 years old. Think about that for a moment. The foundational programming of the system that governs 95% of your reality, your beliefs about what's possible for you, your automatic responses to challenge and opportunity, your deep sense of what you deserve and what you don't. Most of it was installed when you were a small child who had no say in the matter whatsoever. You absorbed it from the adults around you, from the tone of voice your parents used when money was discussed, from the way conflict was handled or not handled in your household, from the messages your environment sent you repeatedly and consistently about people like you and what people like you get to have, from the cultural and social programming of the specific world you grew up in, with all of its spoken and unspoken rules about what's realistic and what's foolish and what's meant for other people. None of that programming was chosen. None of it was evaluated. None of it was tested against reality and consciously accepted. It was simply absorbed, the way a child absorbs language, automatically, completely, without the capacity to filter or reject. And then you grew up, and you started wanting things, real things, things that the programming said weren't available to someone with your history, your background, your specific constellation of limitations. And you started trying to change. Here's where it gets specific. Here's the part that explains every failed attempt, every dissolution, every "why won't this stick?" Your conscious mind, the 5%, the screen, has a guardian. Neuroscientists call it the critical faculty. For our purposes, let's call it the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper's job is straightforward. Protect the existing program. Evaluate every incoming piece of information against the established archive. Everything the system has accepted as true about reality, about you, about what's possible, and reject anything that contradicts it. The gatekeeper is not malicious. It genuinely believes it's protecting you. It equates the familiar with safe and the unknown with dangerous. And it is extraordinarily good at its job. So here's what happens every time you try to make a genuine change. You sit down. Maybe it's a Sunday afternoon. Maybe you've just finished reading something that lit you up. Maybe you've had a conversation that cracked something open, and you write down a new vision for your life. Real abundance, genuine health, relationships that feel alive rather than exhausting, a version of your days that feels like yours rather than like something you settled for. You feel it. For a moment, it's real. The possibility is genuinely present. And then the gatekeeper wakes up. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't say, "Hello, I am now going to systematically dismantle your hope." It just starts doing what it was built to do. It consults the archive. It cross-references your new vision against everything the system has accepted as established truth. You've tried this before. Remember how that ended? The evidence in the existing record contradicts this new input. The financial history says scarcity. The health history says this is just how your body is. The relationship history says these patterns are part of who you are. New map rejected, current programming maintained, and the vision dissolves, not because it wasn't real, because the gatekeeper was faster. Now here's the part that most self-help content completely skips over, and it's the part that makes all the difference. The gatekeeper doesn't just reject your new vision when you consciously try to install it. It also determines what kinds of commands actually reach the servers. And this is the key to understanding why everything you've tried has produced limited results. Your subconscious mind does not understand English or any spoken language. It does not process verbal declarations. It is not moved by the grammatical structure of your intentions. It does not respond to affirmations, no matter how carefully worded or how consistently repeated, if those affirmations are delivered in a form it cannot process. The subconscious is a pre-verbal intelligence. It existed within you long before you learned your first word. It thinks in the language it was born speaking, the language of feeling and image, of vibration and symbol, of lived, embodied, sensory experience. When you say the words, "I am prosperous," genuinely, sincerely, looking yourself in the eye in the bathroom mirror at 6:47 in the morning. Your conscious mind hears that declaration and notes it as an intention. But your subconscious servers, they're not listening to the words. They're listening to the signal underneath the words, the frequency, the felt sense, the actual emotional and biochemical state your body is in as you say those words. And if the actual felt sense underneath "I am prosperous" is the tight, constricted, low-grade anxiety of someone who doesn't have enough, and for most people it is, then the servers hear the signal, not the words. The signal says scarcity, fear, lack. This is not true, and we both know it. And the servers, in their perfect and loyal execution, build more of what the signal describes. Your words are the surface. Your feeling is the signal. And the signal is always, in every case without exception, what gets executed. Let me give you an image for this that I think will make it permanent. Imagine you're in an airport. You're trying to get to Tokyo. That's your destination. That's what you've decided. That's where you've told everyone you're going. You walk up to the departure board, you find the gate, you sit down and wait. You've done everything right, consciously speaking. But your boarding pass, the actual document that determines where the plane takes you, was printed not from what you said you wanted, but from the deepest, most persistent signal in your system. And that boarding pass says Chicago, same as last year, same as the year before. The plane doesn't care what you said at the departure board. It goes where the boarding pass says. Your subconscious is the plane. Your sustained emotional frequency is the boarding pass. And no amount of conscious declaration changes the destination until the boarding pass itself is reprinted. That's the work, not more declarations. A new boarding pass. But here's where it gets even more layered, and I want you to really sit with this, because it explains something that has probably confused you for years. The program running in your subconscious right now, the old code, the inherited boarding pass, it's not just sitting there passively. It's actively reinforced every single day through 3 mechanisms that most people are completely unaware of. The first mechanism is the identity loop. Your subconscious doesn't just store beliefs about the world, it stores a belief about you. A deeply embedded sense of who you are and what kind of person you are. And that identity belief is extraordinarily resistant to change, because the system treats it as foundational. If the identity belief is, "I am someone who struggles financially," then every piece of incoming evidence gets filtered through that lens. A financial win gets minimized. That was lucky. That's not really me. A financial setback gets amplified. See? This is who I am. The identity loop feeds itself. It selects the data that confirms it and discounts the data that challenges it. And it does this automatically, beneath the level of your awareness. The second mechanism is the emotional addiction. This one is harder to hear, so I'm going to say it as gently as I can while still being direct about it. Your nervous system can become habituated to certain emotional states the same way it can become habituated to anything else. If you grew up in an environment of chronic stress, anxiety, or scarcity, your nervous system learned to recognize those states as normal, as the baseline. And here's the uncomfortable part. It can actually resist the absence of those states, not consciously, not intentionally, but at the level of biochemistry and habit, a kind of Physiological homesickness can develop for the familiar emotional climate, even when that climate is painful. This is why people who genuinely want change can unconsciously sabotage it when it starts to arrive, not because they're self-destructive, because the new state, peace, ease, abundance, genuine safety, feels foreign, unfamiliar, and the nervous system, which equates familiar with safe, starts pulling back toward what it knows. The third mechanism is the environmental echo chamber. Look around at the 5 conversations you have most frequently, the news you consume, the social media environment you inhabit, the dominant emotional tone of the spaces you spend the most time in. All of it is broadcasting a frequency, and your subconscious, that perpetually open receiver, is absorbing that frequency and integrating it into its operating program continuously. If the dominant frequency of your environment is complaint, scarcity, threat, and limitation, and for a lot of people, it genuinely is, then no matter how sincere your private intentions are, the servers are receiving a far more sustained and consistent input from the environment than from your morning affirmations. The environment isn't neutral. It's programming you constantly, and most people have never once made a conscious decision about what they're willing to let in. So here's the honest picture of what's been happening. You have a gatekeeper blocking new programs from reaching the servers. You have servers that only respond to felt frequency, not verbal declarations. You have an identity loop that filters evidence to confirm the existing belief. You have an emotional addiction pulling you back toward familiar states, and you have an environment continuously reinforcing the old program with a signal stronger than almost anything your conscious mind can generate during a brief morning practice. And in the face of all of that, you have been trying to change your life by repeating words. No wonder it hasn't worked. No wonder the ceiling keeps staying exactly where it is. Not because you're not trying, because you've been trying in the wrong language, through the wrong channel, at the wrong time of day, against a force of entrenchment that dwarfs anything your conscious effort alone can overcome. This is not bad news. I know it might feel like bad news for a second, but it's not. It's actually the most clarifying, liberating thing you could possibly understand about your situation. Because the moment you see the mechanism, the actual, precise, mechanical reason why the old approach keeps producing the same results, you're no longer at its mercy. You're not broken. You're not too far gone. You don't lack willpower or deserve your limitations. You have been using the wrong key for a door that has always been unlocked. The right key exists. It's learnable, it works. And it starts with understanding something that most people spend their entire lives never knowing. Your subconscious speaks a language that has nothing to do with words. And in the next section, we're going to learn to speak it. Learning to speak the language your servers actually understand. There's a moment that happens to almost everyone who starts genuinely exploring this territory. It usually comes after the understanding has clicked, after you've grasped, really grasped, that your subconscious is running 95% of your reality, that the old program is the actual source of the recurring patterns, that words alone can't reach the servers. There's this moment of clarity where you think, okay, I get it. Now what do I actually do? And then someone says, visualize your goals or feel the feeling of your desired reality, and you sit down. Close your eyes. Try to picture yourself successful and healthy and free, and it feels like performing, like acting in a play where you're not quite convinced by your own performance. A kind of hollow going through the motions that produces nothing, confirms nothing, and after a few days, quietly gets abandoned along with everything else. I know that moment. I know that specific flavor of discouragement. And I want to tell you why it happens precisely, mechanically. Because understanding why it fails is what makes it possible to do it right. The reason visualization and feel the feeling techniques produce so little result for most people is not that the underlying principle is wrong. The principle is correct. It is neurologically, physiologically, demonstrably correct. The reason it doesn't work is that most people are doing it from the wrong place, in the wrong direction, with the wrong understanding of what the territory actually needs from them. They are watching the movie of their desired life from the audience. The territory needs you to be the main character on the screen. That's the whole difference. And once you feel it, genuinely feel it rather than just understand it intellectually, everything changes. Let's start with feeling, because feeling is the foundation of everything that follows. And most people have a fundamentally confused relationship with what feeling actually is in this context. When I say feeling, I don't mean emotion in the casual, everyday sense. I don't mean the surge of excitement you get when you imagine something good. I don't mean manufactured enthusiasm or forced positivity applied like a coat of paint over a foundation that hasn't changed. I mean vibration. I mean the actual measurable biochemical state of your body. The specific cocktail of neurotransmitters and hormones and electrical signals that your nervous system is producing right now, in this moment, as you read these words. That state is not just an experience. It is a broadcast. It is a continuous, real-time signal being transmitted from your body into the operating system of your subconscious. And the subconscious receives that signal and treats it as a command, not an intention, a command. Here's how precise this is. When you experience genuine fear, not imagined fear, not mild concern, but the real thing, the tight chest and the racing heart and a narrowed vision, your subconscious receives a specific command. Threat detected. Shut down long-term construction. Redirect all resources to immediate survival. And it executes that command with complete faithfulness. It floods your system with cortisol. It narrows your perception. It stops the invisible orchestration of opportunity and connection that it's capable of generating when it's not in emergency mode. Not because it wants to harm you, because you gave it a command in the language it understands, and it obeyed. When you experience genuine relief, not performed relief, not the words, "I feel relieved," but the actual somatic unwinding of tension, the loosening in the chest, the breath that goes just a little deeper, your subconscious receives a different command. Resolution has occurred. The struggle is finished. Open the system. Begin the work of expansion and regeneration, and it executes that command with the same complete faithfulness. It releases oxytocin. It relaxes the musculature. It expands your perceptual range. It begins the extraordinary work of organizing your external circumstances to match the internal state it's been given. Your body is not just responding to your reality. Your body is creating it. The feeling is the boarding pass, and the boarding pass determines the destination. Now, here's what most people do with this understanding and why it doesn't work. They try to generate the feeling of their desired reality by thinking about it. They sit down, they try to feel wealthy, they try to feel healthy, they try to feel loved and secure and free, and what they actually generate is a thin, conceptual approximation of those states. A mental picture of what those states might look like, viewed from the outside, from the familiar vantage point of someone who doesn't yet have them. And the subconscious, that sophisticated receiver calibrated to genuine frequency, is not impressed. Because what it's actually receiving underneath the attempted positive visualization is the baseline signal, the persistent, habituated, deeply grooved emotional climate of someone who is trying to feel something they don't currently feel. And that signal, the signal of reaching, of wanting, of not yet having, is itself a command. Maintain the current state. The desired reality is in the future. Keep it there. The territory doesn't respond to wanting, it responds to having. This is the shift that changes everything, and it has a name. Murphy called it assumption, not affirmation, not visualization. Assumption. Assumption is not a technique you perform. It's a state you inhabit. The difference is everything. Affirmation says, I will be prosperous. I am working toward health. I am moving in the direction of the life I want. All of that grammatical structure, however sincerely intended, contains within it an affirmation of current absence. The territory hears the gap between where you are and where you're trying to go, and it maintains the gap because that's the map it's been given. Assumption says it is already done, not as a declaration, as a felt, lived, embodied experience of a reality that has already arrived. The cartographer doesn't draw a map to the destination. They pick up the map and discover they're already there. This sounds like a subtle distinction, and it is anything but. It is the difference between a rehearsal and a performance, between standing at the edge of the water and swimming, between knowing how to play a song and actually playing it. And the way you access it, the way you move from performing an approximation to genuinely inhabiting the state, is through the body, not the mind. Let me make this completely concrete because abstract spiritual language has a way of sounding profound without actually giving you anything to do. And what I want is for you to be able to use this tonight. Let's say your desired reality is financial relief, not abstract wealth, the specific, embodied experience of financial relief, the felt sense of being okay, of the pressure having lifted, of waking up in the morning without that particular tightness in your chest that comes with chronic financial stress. Most people, when they try to work with this, visualize money. They picture bank accounts with large numbers. They imagine buying things. They construct mental movies of financial success. And the subconscious receives those images and notes. This person is imagining a reality they don't currently inhabit. The gap is confirmed. The current reality is maintained. Here's what assumption asks you to do instead. Don't visualize the money. Generate the feeling of relief itself. Not the cause of relief, relief itself. The specific somatic experience of a weight being lifted. Do you know that feeling? You've felt it before. Maybe not about money, but you've felt genuine relief at some point in your life. The moment when something you were dreading turned out to be okay. The phone call that confirmed the thing you were afraid of wasn't true. The conversation that resolved something that had been hanging over you for weeks. Remember that feeling, not the situation, the feeling, the specific way relief feels in your body, the loosening, the exhale that goes deeper than the ones before it, the particular quality of ease that only arrives when something genuinely resolves. Now generate that feeling deliberately, not because anything has resolved. It hasn't yet externally, but because you have the capacity, as a conscious being with access to your own nervous system, to produce that biochemical state through deliberate focus and embodied memory. That feeling, genuinely generated, not performed, not approximated, but actually felt in your body, is a command to your subconscious servers. Resolution has occurred. The financial struggle is finished. The new reality has arrived. Update the map accordingly. And the territory, which does not distinguish between the feeling produced by external event and the feeling produced by deliberate internal authority, receives that command and begins its work. Now I want to talk about image, because feeling and image work together, and understanding their relationship is what allows you to make this practical rather than theoretical. Image is the coordinate. It's the address you give the territory, the specific blueprint of the reality you're asking it to construct. But here's what most people get wrong about image. They think the quality of the image is what matters. The vividness of the picture, the clarity of the details, the resolution of the mental movie. The territory doesn't care about picture quality. It cares about whether you're in the picture or watching it. This is the inside versus outside distinction, and it's crucial. When most people visualize, they see themselves in the scene from the outside, like watching a movie where they're the star. They see themselves at the desk, or in a healthy body, or in a loving relationship. It looks right. It feels like visualization, but the subconscious processes it as observation, not experience. And observation doesn't change the program. Experience does. The shift is to step into the scene, to be behind the eyes of the person in the desired reality rather than watching them from the audience. What would you see from inside the experience of your desired reality? Not yourself, the world around you, as seen from within that life. The specific quality of light coming through a particular window. The texture of the surface your hands are resting on. The sound of something in the background. What would you feel physically? The weight of your body in a chair, the specific sensation of ease in your chest, the temperature of the air. 5 seconds of that, genuinely inhabited, is worth more to your subconscious than 30 minutes of watching a mental movie of yourself being successful. 5 seconds, inside, feeling the feeling of it being done. That's the scene. That's what Murphy called the memory of the future. A brief, sensory, emotionally charged loop of the desired reality experienced as present tense fact. Let me give you an image that will make assumption make sense in a completely different way. Think about a friend of yours, someone you know well, someone whose company you genuinely enjoy. Imagine you're going to meet them for coffee tomorrow morning. Not a maybe, not a plan that might fall through. A confirmed, solid plan that both of you are looking forward to. Now notice how you relate to that meeting between now and tomorrow morning. You don't obsess over it. You don't constantly check whether it's still real. You don't try to convince yourself it's going to happen. You don't lie awake at night hoping it doesn't fall through. You simply know it's happening. It's settled. It's in the category of things that are real, and your entire relationship with it is characterized by a quiet, unquestioned certainty. That quality, that settled, unquestioned, non-anxious knowing, is assumption, not the electric excitement of something you desperately want, not the white-knuckled effort of trying to believe something you're not sure is true, the calm, ordinary, taken-for-granted quality of something that's already real. That's the frequency the territory needs from you, not intensity, settledness, not fireworks, calm certainty. And the way you access calm certainty about something that hasn't yet manifested externally is through the body, through the somatic experience of already having arrived, through relief rather than excitement, through completion rather than anticipation. I want to address something that's probably already forming as a question in your mind, because it's the most common and most important objection, and glossing over it would be doing you a disservice. If I try to feel like I already have something I don't have, isn't that just lying to myself? Isn't that a form of denial? And how is denial going to change anything real? It's a completely reasonable question, and it deserves a direct answer. What you're doing is not lying to yourself about the current external reality. You're not pretending the bank account says something different than it does. You're not telling yourself the body is already healed when it isn't. You're not denying the present circumstances. What you're doing is refusing to let the present circumstances be the only input your subconscious receives. Right now, without any deliberate intervention on your part, your external reality is continuously broadcasting a signal into your subconscious, confirming the old program, reinforcing the current map, maintaining the existing pattern. The present circumstances are already giving the servers their instructions all day, every day, with a consistency and an emotional charge that your occasional conscious intentions can't compete with. Assumption is not denial of what is. It's the deliberate introduction of what's chosen. It's the act of saying, yes, this is what the external landscape currently looks like. And also, I am capable of generating the internal state of my chosen reality and giving my subconscious a different instruction, not instead of the present reality, alongside it, with enough consistency and enough genuine felt conviction that gradually, and then suddenly, the instruction changes the program, and the program changes the landscape. The external follows the internal, always, without exception, not because it's magic, because that's the mechanical reality of how this system works. You are not lying to yourself. You are learning to give your own servers a new boarding pass. Here's your practical takeaway from this section, something you can actually do, not just think about. Tonight, before you go to sleep, I want you to try something for 5 minutes, not 30. 5. Identify the single feeling that would be most present in your body if your most deeply desired change had already occurred. Not what you would have, what you would feel. Give it a name: relief, peace, freedom, wholeness. Whatever the word is for you, then close your eyes and find a memory, any memory from anywhere in your life, where you actually felt that feeling, even briefly, even in a completely different context. The feeling itself is what matters, not the situation that produced it. Spend 2 minutes genuinely remembering that feeling, not performing it, actually remembering it, until you can feel some trace of it in your body. Then, keeping that feeling present, construct a single brief scene, 5 seconds, not a movie, of your desired reality, experienced from the inside. What would you see? What would you feel physically? Let it be simple. Let it be sensory. Let yourself be in it rather than watching it. And then let the feeling of that scene, the relief, the peace, whatever it is, just rest in your body for the remaining time. That's it. 5 minutes. No pressure, no performance, no measure of success. You're not trying to manifest anything tonight. You're learning the language. And the language, once genuinely spoken even once, even briefly, begins to do something to the servers that no amount of verbal declaration ever could. You're starting to speak the right language. The territory is already listening. The 2 windows that open twice every day, and why almost everyone misses them. There's a moment that happens every single night. You're lying in bed. The day is finally over. The messages, the decisions, the small frictions and the larger worries, all of it gradually losing its grip. Your body starts to settle. Your thoughts begin to slow down, to lose their sharp edges, to drift from the coherent and logical into something looser, more associative, more strange. Images start appearing that you didn't consciously summon. The boundary between what you're thinking and what you're dreaming becomes soft, porous, hard to locate precisely. And then you're asleep. That transition, that specific, brief, utterly ordinary moment of crossing from wakefulness into sleep, is one of the 2 most powerful creative portals available to you as a human being. It happens every night. It has happened every night of your life. And the vast majority of people pass through it completely unconsciously, receiving none of its extraordinary potential, and instead carrying into the deepest processing of their night the accumulated emotional residue of everything the day handed them, the stress of the commute, the conversation that didn't go well, the bill they'd been trying not to think about, the low-grade anxiety that never quite resolves. And then they wonder why the pattern doesn't change. It doesn't change because the last instruction the servers received before the deepest processing of the night was more of the same. The old program is confirmed. Maintain the current map. What if you change the last instruction? What if, instead of carrying the day's emotional residue into that portal, you carried something else? Something chosen? Something precise? Something in the exact language the territory is designed to receive? That's what this section is about. First, let's understand why this particular window, the threshold between waking and sleep, is so extraordinarily powerful. Because it's not arbitrary, it's neurological. Your brain produces different types of electrical waves depending on your state of consciousness. When you're fully awake, alert, actively thinking and processing, the state you've been in for most of today, your brain is producing what neuroscientists call beta waves. Fast, high frequency, associated with active analytical thinking. This is the state in which your gatekeeper is fully on duty, fully armed, fully committed to its function of protecting the existing program from any new input that contradicts it. As you relax, as the demands of the day release their grip and your body begins its descent toward sleep, your brain shifts frequency. Beta becomes alpha. Alpha is the state of relaxed awareness, of daydreaming, of that pleasant open quality you sometimes feel on a slow Sunday morning or in the last minutes of a genuinely relaxing bath. The gatekeeper is still present in alpha, but it's softer, less rigid, more permeable. And then, if you continue descending, something extraordinary happens. Alpha becomes theta. Theta is the state you pass through in the last moments before sleep fully takes you, and again in the first moments after waking, before full consciousness is restored. It is the hypnagogic state, that dreamlike, image-rich, boundary-dissolving place where thoughts become pictures and the distinction between the real and the imagined becomes genuinely difficult to locate. In theta, the gatekeeper is asleep, not weakened, not distracted, asleep. The critical faculty, that relentless evaluator that spends your waking hours cross-referencing every new input against the existing archive and rejecting anything that contradicts the established record, is offline. And the subconscious, that vast, receptive, perpetually executing system, is fully exposed, fully open, fully available to receive new programming without the filter of skepticism or the interference of logical rejection. In theta, the parchment is soft, the ink goes deep, and whatever impression is made in this state is received not as a claim to be evaluated and potentially rejected, but as an established fact to be accepted and executed. This is why ancient wisdom traditions across cultures, from Vedic practices to Stoic evening meditations to the specific techniques Murphy himself taught, converged on the period before sleep as the most sacred and most powerful time for inner work. They didn't have the neuroscience, but they had the results, and the results consistently pointed to the same conclusion. What you plant in the mind at the threshold of sleep takes root in a way that nothing planted during full wakefulness can match. Here's the problem that most people encounter when they first try to work with this window deliberately. They're exhausted by the time they get there. They've spent the entire day in beta, managing, deciding, reacting, solving, performing, and by the time they lie down, the body wants nothing more than to collapse into unconsciousness as fast as possible. And so the portal passes in seconds, unnoticed and unused, and the night's deep processing runs on yesterday's program. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, they try to use the window with the same effortful concentration they apply to everything else. They lie down. They squeeze their eyes shut. They try very hard to visualize with maximum vividness and maximum intensity, and the effort itself keeps them in beta. The gatekeeper stays awake because effortful concentration is a beta activity, and the whole thing defeats itself. The theta portal cannot be forced. It can only be approached. And approaching it correctly requires something that most high-achieving, productivity-oriented people between the ages of 24 and 45 find genuinely counterintuitive: deliberate, structured surrender. Let me show you exactly what that looks like. The preparation begins before you lie down, not with an elaborate ritual. I'm not going to give you a 27-step process that you'll follow twice and then abandon, but with a single conscious act of transition. Before you get into bed, take 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes, set a timer if you need to do one thing: consciously release your grip on the day, not resolve it, not process it, not analyze what went well and what didn't. Release it. The practical form of this is simple. Sit somewhere quiet. Take 3 slow, deliberate breaths, the kind where the exhale is longer than the inhale, the kind that actually signal to your nervous system that the threat has passed and it's safe to lower its defenses. And then, as clearly and as directly as you can, make one internal statement: the day is complete. Whatever is unresolved will be handled by a version of me that's had a full night's processing. Right now, I am setting it down. This is not spiritual bypassing. You're not pretending the problems don't exist. You're making a practical decision about which problems you can actually solve at 11 p.m. with a tired brain, which is none of them, and choosing to stop spending creative energy on a task that has no productive outcome at this hour. The nervous system responds to clear signals, and this is a clear signal. The day's work is finished. It is safe to descend. Now you lie down. And here's where the practice begins in earnest. Start with the body, because the body is the gateway to theta. As long as the body holds physical tension, and most of us hold an enormous amount of physical tension that we've simply stopped noticing because it's been there so long it feels like normal, the nervous system cannot fully lower its defenses. The gatekeeper stays partially activated, scanning for threat, ready to respond. Begin with your feet. Without drama, without elaborate technique, simply bring your attention to your feet and consciously release any holding or tension you find there. Then move upward. Calves, knees, thighs, hips, lower back, the belly, which holds an enormous amount of stress for most people and is usually the last place they think to release, the chest, the shoulders, the arms, the hands. And then, this is crucial, the face. Pay particular attention to the jaw and the forehead. These two areas are the primary physiological anchors of the survival response. When the nervous system is in protective mode, it tightens the jaw and furrows the brow. These are ancient mammalian signals, preparing the body to bite, to fight, to brace. When you consciously release the jaw, really let it go. Let the back teeth separate slightly. Let the tongue drop away from the roof of the mouth. Something shifts in the entire nervous system. The gatekeeper receives a physical signal that safety has been confirmed, and it begins to stand down. As the body releases, turn your attention to the breath. Not a complicated breathing technique, simply the rhythm of air entering and leaving your body, the cool sensation of the inhale at the nostrils, the slight warmth of the exhale, the natural pause between them. This attention, gentle, unforced, without expectation, does something important. It withdraws your creative energy from the scattered, fragmented, anxiety-generating stream of conscious thought and concentrates it on the immediate present moment. The thoughts don't stop, but they begin to slow, to lose their urgency, to become less like commands and more like clouds, visible but not binding. The descent continues, and you'll know you're approaching theta by specific, unmistakable signals. A deep heaviness settles into the limbs. The body feels weighted, almost immovable, not uncomfortable but substantial, as if you've been pressed gently but firmly into the bed. Thoughts begin to lose their logical coherence and start appearing as fragments of imagery, brief, vivid, non-sequential pictures rising from somewhere beneath the thinking mind. The boundary between your body and the space around it becomes soft and difficult to locate precisely, and most reliably, a quality of genuine neutrality descends. The urgencies of the day, the worries, the plans, the unresolved tensions become remote, not resolved, but distant, without their usual power. When that quality arrives, you are at the portal. The gatekeeper is sleeping. The parchment is ready. Now, and only now, you bring the scene. Remember what we built in the last section, that brief 5-second sensory loop of your desired reality, experienced from the inside, the feeling of the thing already done, not the visualization of something you want, the inhabiting of something that is. Here, in the theta state, you don't concentrate on that scene. You don't focus on it with effortful intensity. You simply allow it. Let it arise softly the way a dream arises, not forced, not constructed piece by piece with deliberate cognitive effort, but invited, welcomed, given space to be present. If you're working with the feeling of financial relief, that specific somatic unwinding, that loosening in the chest, let it be present in your body right now, in this soft, weighted, boundary-dissolved state. Let it be the texture of your experience in this moment, not a future you're reaching toward, a present you're inhabiting. If you're working with the feeling of physical well-being, ease in the body, energy, the particular quality of a system that supports you effortlessly, let that be the felt reality of this moment, not a performance, a genuine, allowed, embodied experience of what it feels like to already be there. The scene loops, softly, without urgency. The feeling deepens with each gentle repetition, the way warmth deepens when you move closer to a fire, not by trying, just by being present to it. And then, if the practice has been deep enough and the surrender genuine enough, something remarkable happens. You fall asleep inside the feeling. Sleep is maximum receptivity. It is the deepest state of subconscious openness available to a living human being. And the last instruction the servers receive before the night's deepest processing, the instruction that will run through hours of unconscious reorganization and biological repair and memory consolidation, is the feeling of your fulfilled desire, not a hope, not an intention, a felt, present tense, fully embodied experience of a reality that is already true. The territory, which does not distinguish between the feeling generated by an external event and the feeling generated by deliberate internal authority, receives that instruction as fact, and it begins its work. Now let's talk about the second portal, because it is equally powerful and almost universally wasted. The moment of waking. That first minute, sometimes less, before full waking consciousness is restored. Before the gatekeeper comes fully back online, before the phone is checked and the day's demands begin their assault. That brief, soft, golden window of hypnopompic consciousness where you're aware but not yet armored. Most people obliterate it within seconds of opening their eyes. The phone comes off the charger. The news gets checked. The to-do list asserts itself. The stress of yesterday's unresolved problems, which spent the night quietly waiting, rushes back in with the full energy of something that's had 8 hours to gather momentum. And a gatekeeper, still in the process of coming back online, receives a massive incoming signal. The old reality is confirmed. The familiar program is running. Resume as before. Whatever impression was made during the night's portal practice gets immediately overwritten. The morning window is not a bonus. It is the completion of the practice that the evening portal began. And protecting it is not optional. It is the difference between a practice that genuinely shifts the program and one that simply makes you feel good for a moment before everything reverts. Here's what protecting the morning window looks like practically. Before you open your eyes, or in the first moments after, while that quality of soft receptivity is still present, return to the feeling. Not the scene necessarily, just the feeling, the relief, the peace, the sense of completion. Even 10 seconds of genuinely inhabiting that feeling in the soft openness of early waking is a reinforcement of the previous night's instruction, a confirmation, a second signature on the document. Then, before you reach for the phone, before you engage with the demands of the day, give yourself 5 minutes. 5 minutes is not a luxury. 5 minutes is a decision in the frequency of your chosen reality. This doesn't have to be formal or elaborate. It can be as simple as lying still with your eyes closed and letting the feeling of your desired reality be the dominant texture of your experience. It can be a few pages of something that reinforces the understanding you're building. It can be deliberate, unhurried attention to what you're genuinely grateful for, not as a performance of positivity, but as a genuine acknowledgement of what is already real and good. What you're doing is setting the vibrational tone of the day, choosing the frequency from which the day will be approached, rather than letting the first incoming signal, which in the modern world is almost always designed to activate the survival response, make that choice for you. The morning is not a preparation for the real work. It is the real work. And the 5 minutes before the phone comes on are worth more to your subconscious programming than almost any other 5 minutes in your day. I want to give you one more piece of this, because it addresses something that trips up almost everyone who tries to build this practice. Consistency matters more than intensity. The single most common mistake people make when working with the Theta Portal is trying to make each session as powerful as possible, going for maximum vividness, maximum feeling, maximum everything, and then feeling discouraged when some nights the practice feels flat or distracted or like nothing much is happening. Here's the truth about the subconscious servers. They respond to patterns, not performances. They respond to repetition, to consistency, to the sustained signal over time. A gentle, somewhat distracted 5-minute practice every night for 30 days will produce more genuine change in your subconscious programming than 10 extraordinary sessions spread across 6 months. Think about it in terms of the glass of turbid water we mentioned earlier. The old program, the inherited fears, the conditioned limitations, the deeply grooved beliefs about what's possible for someone with your history is the turbid water. You cannot scoop it out one dramatic session at a time. What displaces it is the steady, consistent, patient flow of clean water, not a flood, a current, maintained over time. Some nights, the portal will feel profound. The feeling will be vivid and real, and you'll fall asleep inside it with a clarity that feels genuinely different. Other nights, it will feel ordinary, even mechanical. The thoughts will wander. The feeling will be faint. The whole thing will feel like going through the motions. Do it anyway. Both nights matter equally to the servers. The consistent signal is the signal, and consistency, the willingness to show up for the practice even when it doesn't feel transcendent, is itself a message to the subconscious. This is real. This is not a passing enthusiasm. This is the new direction. Permanently. The territory responds to permanence. Give it permanence. One final thing before we move to the last section, and it's perhaps the most practically important thing in this entire chapter. Guard what you consume in the 2 hours before the portal opens. The nervous system takes approximately 90 minutes to fully process and physiologically integrate a significant emotional stimulus. When you watch something designed to activate outrage or fear, news coverage, conflict-heavy social media, emotionally charged content of any kind, your body is still processing that stimulus when you lie down. The nervous system is still partially activated. The gatekeeper is still partially on duty, and the portal, when it opens, is narrowed by the interference of whatever emotional residue the last 2 hours deposited. This is not about becoming a hermit or unplugging from the world. It's about making a practical, strategic decision about the 2 hours that directly precede the most powerful creative window in your day. What you feed your nervous system in those 2 hours is what it carries into the portal. Choose what you carry. A conversation that genuinely nourishes you. Something you're learning that excites you in a clean, genuine way. Music that relaxes rather than stimulates. Silence, if silence is available. Your own thoughts, unhurried, without the pressure of productivity. The portal is worth protecting. Not just because the practice itself matters, though it does, but because what you do in that window represents a fundamental act of self-respect, a declaration that your inner life is worth tending, that the most powerful creative act available to you deserves the same intentionality you give to the things you consider genuinely important. The window opens tonight, as it has every night of your life. This time, you'll be ready for it. The final test, how to hold your heading when the storm arrives. Everything we've covered so far has been preparing you for this moment, not the theta portal, not the language of feeling and image, not the understanding of the servers and the gatekeeper and the boarding pass. All of that, as essential and as real as it is, has been preparation for the single most difficult and most consequential moment in the entire process of genuine transformation. The moment when your external reality pushes back. Because it will. Not as punishment, not as evidence that the principles don't work, but as the inevitable, predictable, almost mathematically certain consequence of the way change actually unfolds in a system that has been running the same program for years or decades. The old reality doesn't dissolve quietly. It doesn't step aside with grace and make room for the new map. It pushes. It presents evidence. It shows up in your inbox and your bank account and your body and your relationships with what feels like irrefutable proof that nothing has changed, that nothing is changing, that the hope you've been cultivating is exactly the kind of naive, wishful thinking that serious, realistic people eventually learn to let go of. And in that moment, that specific, visceral, this is actually happening moment, every piece of understanding you've built will be tested, not theoretically, in your body, in your chest, in the automatic, ancient, deeply conditioned reflex that has been responding to threat the same way since before you had the language to describe it. This is the moment that determines everything, not the portal practice, not the quality of your visualization, not the sophistication of your understanding. This moment, the storm, and what you do in the first 5 seconds after it hits. Let me be completely honest with you about something, because I think this is where a lot of teaching about the subconscious and manifestation and inner work loses its credibility by making it sound easier than it is. Non-reaction is hard, not conceptually hard, genuinely, physically, in your body, hard. Because the survival response, the cascade of cortisol and adrenaline and muscular contraction and perceptual narrowing that floods your system when a genuine threat is perceived, is not a character flaw. It is a 300-million-year-old biological system that has been extraordinarily successful at keeping living organisms alive in dangerous environments. It is fast. It is powerful. It is largely automatic. And it does not pause to ask whether your personal development philosophy has any thoughts on the matter before it takes over. When the bill arrives and the account is empty, your body responds before your mind has time to intervene. When the diagnosis comes and the words are clinical and final sounding, the chest constricts before you've had a single conscious thought about it. When the relationship fractures in a way that feels irreparable, the fear arrives in the body, raw, immediate, real, before you've had the opportunity to remember anything about subconscious programming or the language of the territory or any of it. The question is never whether the wave will hit. It will always hit. The question is whether the wave determines the heading of the ship. And the answer to that question, the practical, in-the-moment answer, not the theoretical one, depends on a skill that is built in advance, not summoned in the crisis. Here's what actually happens in your brain and body when a triggering event strikes, because understanding the mechanics is what gives you the fraction of a second you need. The stimulus arrives, the difficult email, the unexpected news, the confrontation you weren't prepared for. Before that information has even reached the conscious thinking parts of your brain, it has already been routed through the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, which scans it against the archive of previously experienced threats, and, if a match is found, immediately activates the survival response. This happens in milliseconds, faster than thought, faster than choice, and then, approximately a third of a second later, which in neurological terms is an eternity, the information reaches the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, the part of you that can observe, evaluate, choose, and respond rather than simply react. That third of a second is your entire window, not your willpower, not your spiritual development, not your understanding of Joseph Murphy's work. A third of a second in which the thinking brain has the opportunity to insert itself between the stimulus and the automatic response. Miss that window, and the reaction runs its course. The cortisol floods the system. The gatekeeper, now in full emergency mode, issues the command to the territory. Danger confirmed. Cancel all long-term construction. Return to survival programming. And whatever the portal practice has been building, whatever new impression has been made in the soft receptivity of the theta state, gets overwritten by the full emotional authority of the reaction. Catch that window, even imperfectly, even shakily, and something different becomes possible. Here is the protocol. 3 movements, each one simple enough to remember in a moment of genuine stress. The first movement is the sovereign pause. Panic demands speed. The automatic reaction is instantaneous, thoughtless, complete. It closes the gap between stimulus and response so thoroughly that there seems to be no gap at all. Your entire first act of power, in the very first fraction of a second, is to insert a pause into that gap. Not a long pause, a breath. One single, deliberate, slow, audible breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth, with the exhale longer than the inhale. That breath does several things simultaneously. Physiologically, a slow exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest counterpart to the fight-or-flight response, and begins to interrupt the cortisol cascade before it reaches full activation. Neurologically, it buys the prefrontal cortex the fraction of a second it needs to come online. And symbolically, it is the most direct declaration available to your own nervous system. I am not at the mercy of this. I am making a choice. The rudder is back in your hands. One breath. That's the whole first movement. The second movement is the cold diagnosis. Having paused, your instinct will be to fight the feeling, to suppress it, deny it, push it down, override it with positive thinking. And that instinct, however understandable, will make things worse. Suppressed emotion doesn't disappear. It accumulates energetic charge and reasserts itself with greater force at the first available opportunity. Instead, observe the feeling from the outside, with the calm detachment of a scientist examining data rather than a person being consumed by it. Name what's happening in precise, non-catastrophic terms, not, I am terrified, this is a disaster, everything is falling apart, but I am experiencing the biochemical activation of inherited fear in response to a familiar pattern. My nervous system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. This is a physiological event, not a verdict on my future, not, this person is attacking me. This is unacceptable. I cannot handle this. But I am observing a defensive reaction to perceived criticism. The feeling is real. The catastrophic interpretation is a habit, not a fact. This relabeling is not denial. It is precision. And precision has an extraordinary effect on the emotional body. It creates distance between the observer and the observed. You are no longer the storm. You are the navigator on the bridge, watching the storm through reinforced glass, with the full awareness that the bridge is not the sea, and the navigator is not the weather. The feeling can be fully present. The feeling does not determine the heading. The third movement is the anchor injection. The energy that has been stopped, the cortisol, the activation, the force of the reaction, must be redirected. If it's simply blocked without being given a new direction, it will find a way around the blockage. Take that energy and convert it into an anchor. Choose a single word or brief phrase that represents the truth of your new map. Not an affirmation you're trying to believe, a statement of the mechanical reality you've come to understand. It is already done. The harvest is coming. The cause is consistent. The effect must follow. I hold the heading. Repeat it internally, synchronized with the breath, with the focused repetition of someone driving a stake into the ground, not frantically, steadily, with the quality of someone who isn't arguing with the storm, but simply choosing not to be redirected by it. You are not ignoring the difficulty. You are raising your internal frequency above the level at which the difficulty was created, using the only tool that can actually do it, a coherent counterfrequency, sustained with genuine conviction. 3 movements, 1 breath, 1 precise label, 1 anchor. That's the practice, small enough to be usable in a genuine crisis, powerful enough to keep the heading fixed when everything in your environment is pushing for course correction. Now, I want to talk about something that most teachings on this subject skip entirely, and it's something that I think is profoundly important for people in your season of life, roughly mid-20s to mid-40s, building something real, navigating genuine adult stakes and genuine adult consequences. The storms in this season are not small. They're not the minor inconveniences of a life without real responsibilities. They are genuine financial pressure, genuine health concerns, genuine relationship complexity, genuine career uncertainty. They are the kind of circumstances that have real consequences and real timelines and real people depending on the outcomes. And the teaching that says just don't react can feel in the face of that reality either naive or profoundly callous. So I want to be very direct about what non-reaction actually means in a genuinely difficult situation. Non-reaction does not mean inaction. It does not mean you don't make phone calls, don't have conversations, don't take the practical steps that the situation requires. It does not mean you float above your circumstances in a state of detached serenity while real things fall apart around you. Non-reaction means the action you take is not driven by panic. It means the decisions you make come from the clearest, most resourced version of yourself, not from the contracted, cortisol-flooded, tunnel-visioned version that the automatic reaction produces. Here's the practical reality. The decisions you make from a state of genuine calm, even in a difficult situation, even with real stakes, are categorically better than the decisions you make from panic. Your access to creative problem-solving, to unconventional solutions, to the kind of lateral thinking that produces genuine breakthroughs rather than just desperate scrambling, all of it is directly dependent on the state you're in when you make the decision. Non-reaction is not spiritual bypassing. It is strategic superiority. The person who can pause, breathe, diagnose, anchor, and then act from a state of relative clarity will consistently make better decisions, access more creative solutions, and produce better outcomes than the person who reacts immediately and exhausts themselves fighting the wave. That's not philosophy. That's neuroscience. And it's available to you every time you remember to use it. Let's talk about certainty. Because certainty is the compass that makes non-reaction possible. And it's perhaps the most misunderstood concept in this entire field. Certainty is not optimism. Optimism says, I think things will probably work out. It's pleasant. It's well-meaning. And in the face of a genuine storm, it collapses almost immediately because it was never built on anything more substantial than preference. Certainty says, given this specific cause operating through this specific mechanism, this specific effect is not a possibility. It is an inevitability. The difference between those two statements is the difference between hoping a planted seed will grow and knowing, from the mechanics of biology and the nature of soil, that the seed will grow unless actively prevented from doing so. Think about the last time you were genuinely certain about something, not hopeful, certain. Maybe it was something small, that a friend would show up when they said they would, that a skill you'd practiced thoroughly would be available when you needed it, that the sun would rise tomorrow morning. Notice the quality of that certainty, the absence of anxiety around it, the way you didn't need to check, didn't need to reassure yourself, didn't need to perform confidence over a foundation of doubt. It was simply settled, known, not requiring ongoing maintenance. That quality, that settled, self-sustaining, maintenance-free knowing is what you're building toward, and it's built not through a single moment of dramatic decision, but through saturation. Here is the image for saturation that I want you to carry with you. Imagine a glass of water. The water is turbid, murky, clouded with the sediment of years of conditioning, inherited fear, repeated limitation, the old program. Most approaches to change try to fix this by scooping the turbid water out. They work on the problem directly, analyzing it, fighting it, trying to excavate the old beliefs one by one through willpower and conscious effort. You scoop out a spoonful. More turbid water flows in to fill the space. You scoop again. It refills. The glass never clears because you're addressing the symptom rather than the source. The method of saturation does something completely different. It places the glass beneath a flowing source of clean water. The consistent daily practice of the theta portal, the discipline of non-reaction, the repeated return to the frequency of the new map, and simply allows the clean current to continuously displace the turbid. At first, the water remains murky. The practice feels like it's producing nothing visible. The external landscape looks exactly as it always has. The old patterns persist. The old fears arise. The gatekeeper continues its function. But the clean water is flowing continuously, and displacement is inevitable. Gradually, not dramatically, not in a single breakthrough moment, but steadily and irreversibly, the turbid water overflows and leaves. With time and with a constancy that is the only force capable of producing genuine change at the level of the subconscious. The only thing remaining in the glass is clarity. The certainty you feel at that point is not something you manufactured or maintained through effort. It's what remains when the turbidity is gone. It's the natural state of a system no longer in conflict with itself. And when certainty genuinely takes root, when the compass is fully calibrated and its needle holds its position regardless of how the ship moves around it, something paradoxical happens. Manifestation accelerates, not because you're trying harder, because the last remaining obstacle has been removed, the fear of not having it, the anxious, grasping, doubt-saturated frequency of desperately wanting something and not being sure it's coming. When that frequency dissolves, when the certainty is genuine enough that the outcome feels as settled as tomorrow's sunrise, the territory receives a unified, uncontradicted command for the first time. No countersignal, no split frequency, no part of the system broadcasting maybe, while another part broadcasts yes. Just the clean, coherent, laser-precise signal of a conclusion already reached. And the servers, receiving a command with that quality of completeness, mobilize their full, extraordinary capacity. This is what Murphy meant when he talked about the power of assumption. This is what every genuine practitioner of these principles eventually discovers, that the harvest doesn't come when you're straining toward it. It comes when you've genuinely arrived at the place of not needing to strain, when the certainty is real enough that the waiting itself becomes easy. Not because you've given up wanting it, because you've genuinely stopped doubting it's coming. Let's talk about the harvest itself, because there's something that nobody adequately prepares you for. Receiving is a skill, and most people, particularly those who have spent years in the habit of striving and struggling and earning everything the hard way, are genuinely underprepared for it. The harvest doesn't always look the way you expected, The opportunity that materializes may arrive through a channel your logical mind would never have predicted or planned for. The health shift may begin with a conversation that leads to an insight, that leads to a change, that leads, gradually, to the restoration the blueprint was always holding. The financial shift may start with a connection that seems tangential, a conversation that seems unrelated, an impulse that seems too small to matter. And then, in retrospect, you see exactly how the territory was organizing the pieces. The territory's intelligence is not linear. It doesn't follow your preferred sequence. It doesn't respect your expected timeline. It operates through the field of universal connection, through synchronicity, through the invisible orchestration of circumstances that your conscious mind, confined to its narrow strip of linear logic, cannot map in advance. Your responsibility in the harvest is not to validate the root, it is to follow the impulse. When the unexpected idea arrives, act on it before the gatekeeper wakes up and finds reasons not to. When the seemingly random connection presents itself, engage with it genuinely rather than dismissing it because it doesn't fit the logical sequence you had planned. When the small, quiet, easily ignored inner signal points in a direction that makes no logical sense but carries a particular quality of certainty, the felt sense of rightness that is distinct from excitement or wishful thinking, trust it. The territory communicates through intuition. And intuition, in this season of life, in the noise and demand and distraction of a modern adult existence, requires active cultivation, quiet moments, unhurried attention, the willingness to sit with a question rather than immediately filling the space with the first logical answer. The answers that come from the 95% are categorically different from the answers that come from the 5%. They arrive not as conclusions of a logical chain, but as sudden, complete, self-evidently true knowings. They carry their own internal authority. They don't need to be argued for or defended. They simply arrive. And the person who has learned to listen for them and to trust them when they come has access to a quality of intelligence and creative power that no amount of conscious strategizing can replicate. Here is the complete picture of the daily practice, not a complicated program, a simple, repeatable structure that, maintained consistently over time, produces genuine and lasting change in the program that governs your reality. In the evening, 2 hours before the portal opens, consciously transition out of the day. Release what doesn't need to be carried. Guard the input. What you consume in those 2 hours sets the nervous system state you carry into the most powerful creative window of your day. At the portal, approach through the body. Release the physical tension systematically. Follow the breath into theta. Bring the scene, the brief, sensory, inside-out loop of your desired reality already fulfilled. Let the feeling deepen. Fall asleep inside it if you can. In the morning window, before the phone, before the day's demands, return to the feeling, even briefly, even imperfectly. Set the vibrational tone deliberately rather than letting the first incoming signal do it for you. During the day, when the storms come, and they will come, use the 3 movements: pause, diagnose, anchor. Take the action the situation requires from the clearest state you can access, and then return, as often as necessary, to the frequency of your chosen destination. And through all of it, in the practice and in the storms, and in the ordinary, unremarkable middle days where nothing dramatic is happening in either direction. Cultivate the one quality that makes everything else work. Consistency, not perfection. Consistency, the willingness to return to the practice even when it feels flat. The willingness to apply the three movements even when the storm is severe enough that you only manage one of them. The willingness to trust the soil even when the surface shows no sign of what's growing beneath it. The territory responds to permanence, and permanence is built one ordinary, unglamorous, consistent day at a time. I want to close with something that I hope lands not as inspiration. Inspiration fades, but as genuine, lasting recognition. You came into this with a question. Maybe you didn't articulate it exactly this way, but somewhere beneath the surface, the question has probably been something like, why, despite everything I've done and everything I've tried and everything I genuinely want, does my life keep producing the same results? The answer is not that you're broken, not that you're weak, not that the life you want is reserved for people who are fundamentally different from you. The answer is that you've been a skilled, sincere, hard-working navigator operating with a compass that was calibrated by someone else in a language you were never taught, toward destinations you didn't consciously choose. That changes here, not because you've received a new technique or a new system or a new set of things to try, but because the understanding itself, genuine, felt, embodied understanding of how this system actually works, changes the relationship between you and your own mind in a way that cannot be fully undone. You now know that the 95% exists. You know what it speaks. You know when it's most receptive. You know how to approach it without triggering the gatekeeper. You know what to do when the storm hits. And you know that the harvest, however it arrives, through whatever sequence of unexpected circumstances the territory orchestrates, is not a matter of hope. It is a matter of cause and effect. You are the cartographer. The map you draw, in the language of genuine feeling, delivered at the threshold of sleep, maintained through the storms with the consistency of someone who knows the mechanics rather than hoping for the magic. That map is the cause. The life that reflects it is the inevitable effect. The continent has always been yours, every square inch of it. You're just finally learning how to live there. If this has shifted something real in the way you understand yourself, not just intellectually, but somewhere deeper, in the place where real things shift, then share it with someone who's still exhausted from fighting the river. Someone who deserves to know that the struggle is not evidence of their inadequacy. It's evidence of a mismatch between their methods and the actual mechanics of creation. Leave a comment with the number 999 if this landed as recognition rather than information. Because recognition is where it actually begins.